All right, well, why don't we get started? This is Jenny Brooke Condon from Seton Hall Law School, and on behalf of the AALS Clinical Section Technology Committee, I want to thank you to our third installment of our Technology Tuesdays webinar series. And I want to welcome and thank John Mayer, the Executive Director of the Center for Computer-Assisted Legal Instruction, or CALI, for taking the time today to share his expertise and to speak with us about a service offered by CALI called A2JAUTHOR, which is a platform that legal instructors and clinicians can use to explore access to justice. So John, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Jenny. And by the way, if my sound goes wonky, please jump in and let me know. It's happened a couple of times, and usually just unplugging and replugging in my mic fixes it, but it's hard for me to tell that it's happening. All right, hello everybody. My name is John Mayer, and I'm the Executive Director of CALI. I'm going to prove to you that I'm here by sharing my webcam. There I am. This is the point at which the kids walk in from behind me and interrupt, and I become an intertube YouTube sensation, right? No, just kidding. I was just watching that the Korean expert who had his kid show up when he was on the BBC, and how that proves that there's humanity on the internet after all. Anyhow, like I said, my name is John Mayer. I'm the Executive Director of CALI. Happy Pi Day. For you nerds, that means it's 314, get it, 3.14. That's what I look like. CALI is a 501c3. We're a membership consortia of over 200 U.S. law schools. I hope I'm not telling you something you didn't know. We're probably most famous for our lessons, over 1,000 of them, web-based tutorials. You should be assigning them to your students. We also publish textbooks for free. In other words, I'm looking for authors, people to write casebooks, and I will pay them money, and then we will publish them for free as ebooks. One of our most popular book, unfortunately, is Images of Law coloring book. Apparently, that's a bestseller in our free basis. It gets the most downloads. We're also known for our CALI Awards, but I'm here to talk to you about A2JAUTHOR, another one of our projects. So my talk is hopefully no more than 30 minutes, maybe a little bit longer. We'll be leaving time for questions, of course, and it covers three points I wanted to make: access to justice gap, experiential learning, and practice-ready graduates. And the TLDR, and if you don't know what TLDR means, that means too long, didn't read, is that the access to justice gap is too big. Experiential learning, we don't do enough of it, and our graduates aren't practice ready. Right? Those are the themes or the ideas that I've structured this talk around. So first, the access to justice gap. I'm hoping this is familiar territory to you, but to briefly cover, there's been numerous reports, these are pictures of just two of them, on how bad things are for poor people who require or would need civil legal aid. And mostly that's provided by the Legal Services Corporation. They handle over 1 million cases a year, but 50% of the people who are eligible for legal aid, so if they could get in the door, they would get it, they would be okay, can't get it because there aren't enough legal aid attorneys. So fully 50% of the people, the door shuts at 5 p.m., they're told to deal with it in some other way. But the number is worse than that because so many people who have a legal problem don't even bother to try to go to legal aid, or they're of modest means, which they say they're working poor or lower middle income and can't afford a lawyer. And so the number estimates are up in the 80% of the people do not get or cannot get representation, and it's getting worse. So way back in 2000, LSC started a program called TIG, the Technology Initiative Program. Gets funded about $4 million a year. This is completely outside of the LSC's money. And the basic idea here was maybe there are technology things that we could be doing as a community that will help people help themselves, help the SRLs, the self-represented litigants. The primary mission at that point, way back in 2000, was consolidate all the many websites into one website per state, so state websites, one per state, and create a national server, one place where document assembly could be done, because document assembly was seen as a low-hanging fruit for helping people help themselves by helping them fill out court forms or fill out legal forms, and more, as you'll see. So the primary tool there was Hot Docs, although it was judged that the interface for Hot Docs was still awfully hard for people to use, and so we designed A2JAUTHOR as a front end to document assembly to increase the accuracy and the completion rate for people who are solving their own legal problems. And I'll be diving into that a lot more. So the basic idea is you have a problem, you eventually hopefully find your way to a statewide website. This is what Illinois looked like a while back, although they've gone through a redesign. And I took an interior page here to show you that the goal is for you to eventually find your way to the answer to your problem or the form or the process that you need to solve your particular legal problem. Now, how you get here is a whole nother interesting discussion about guidance and triage, but I'll touch on that a little bit later. From there, you get redirected to the national server. You spend only as much time here as you need to click the TOS, the terms of service. Perhaps create an account if you want to save your answers so that you can come back and edit them and reproduce or recreate the form or the outcome that you wanted. And then you're into A2J. So this is what A2J looks like, and I hope it doesn't look like other web forms or like court forms that you normally see. As a matter of fact, it was specifically designed not to look like a form filling out sort of situation. It's very, it's very clean, lots of white space. There's a person there who's going to walk you through this process. Your progress is determined. Your progress is measured by how close you're getting to that building way in the back, which is supposed to be a courthouse. There's little pop-ups, what is a felony? So that if the author has put questions in there that might require some definition, some legalese, or some fleshing out, you can have like little pop-ups that explain more about what's going on. We call them learn mores in our parlance. This was the result of an intense effort back in the early 2000s and the early aughts with Cali, Chicago Kent College of Law, and the Institute of Design. It was a very early effort in design thinking, and legal process that that we were involved in. So the other thing that you might notice about this is it looks and feels a little bit like the thing that's closest to it is something like TurboTax. If you've used one of those tax filler outer softwares or websites, what do? They ask one question at a time. They allow you to go find other information, and come back. But there's other aspects that we've learned in training law faculty and then training lawyers how to create these, we call them guided interviews. A key here is that we wanted to eliminate the need for having a programmer if you wanted to automate a court process or a form. Programmers are expensive, and we wanted sort of like to create a standard or a platform so that all the forms or all the form processes would look similar or the same. We also wanted to force the authors to use as little language as possible. I'm going to Alt-Tab over to an actual A2J guided interview running right now. It looks different because what I was showing you was a screenshot of the old version. This is the brand new version. The old version runs in Flash. Flash was an awesome piece of software back in 2000, 2004. It's not so awesome these days, so the new version is written in JavaScript. So here I am walking my way through a guided interview. Actually, let's hit back. And you notice there's the amount of text here that I've highlighted, we make this box small on purpose because we want to force the authors, the lawyers, to not force people to read great walls of text. This was a design decision in order to prevent great walls of text that people just naturally would skip over. Nobody reads, nobody likes to scroll through huge amounts of text. And if they need more text because it's required that the person's going to read it, well then use more screens rather than overload the screen with too much information. So if I click through this a few times, now I'm represented by the female figure on the right. Here's an example of a learn more because he's asking, do you need help with criminal charges? What is a misdemeanor? I click more. It's an illegal yet minor offense. I find that not very helpful, but at least it's an example of a learn more in this situation. So the other thing we've learned in designing guided interviews is that the lawyer needs to front load the questions as much as possible with things that disqualify people. So if you're here for a parking ticket, you're in the wrong place. If you're here filling out the wrong form, ask me the questions that will determine that as quickly as possible so that you don't waste my time. Respect me, respect my time. That was a conscious decision in the design and in how people approach the automation of guided interviews in this. All right, I'll be back on this, but I'm going to jump back to the PowerPoint. I think I was back there. There it is. Yep. Very good. So behind that guided interview is actually a giant, or maybe not so giant, a decision tree, basically a flow chart. It asks questions, it branches based on the answers. Do you have kids? No? Okay, I won't ask you about their ages or their birth dates or things like that. How much money do you make? $150,000 a year. Okay, I'm now going to branch you out because you've been means tested out of using this, or we can't help you as legal aid because you earn too much money or something like that. So what this is in computer science parlance is it's an expert system because it has the expertise of the lawyer, the practice expertise, hopefully built into the questions and into the decisions that are causing the branches to happen and deciding which information to display and which questions to ask to the user, the self-represented litigant. Now, the software is not a lawyer, it's not representing the person, but the person who writes the software is acting as a guide or as somebody who provides information to that person. And so that's being captured inside the decision tree and inside the guided interview. So, to cut to the chase, has this been very successful? It's been massively successful. There's over 1,000 guided interviews on LHI. Over the last 10 years, they've been used 3.5 million times for 2 million documents produced. This isn't all the usages of A2J either. There's a lot of it being used on other websites where we don't get the statistics because they're using them in ways that we can't. We don't have access to that. And the fact that 1.5 million of these didn't result in an assembly is not a failure. It's not, oh, people messed up or erred out, because a positive result might be that you get through part of a guided interview and find out that you need to be someplace else or that you're ineligible, and that might be one of the goals of it. If this was an online intake for legal aid, of which I think there's about a dozen states doing that, then part of the goal might be to find out whether or not you're eligible. If you make too much money, if you have some sort of aspect of your life that makes you ineligible to receive legal aid from what LSC funded people can provide to you. So A2J is used in almost every state in the U.S. What's wrong with you, South Dakota there? And is available for free for legal aid organizations to use. For that matter, it's available for schools to use, but I'll talk about that in a second. It's being used in courts. Here's an example. The New York courts, they've renamed it DIY forms. They've automated a whole bunch of family forms, uncontested divorce, custody visitation, paternity. The reason why I bring this up is because the story here is amazing. It gets used over 100,000 times a year, and they get responses from, they ask survey questions from people that use this, and they get responses that look like this. This program is outstanding. I posted the website on my Facebook. I did not have the money for a lawyer. Thank you. Helpful during this difficult time, emotionally and financially. See, providing some type of help, even if you can't provide a lawyer, is better than no help. And we hope that the design of the software is positive and that it actually provides very good help. I'm going to jump back to here because I have the actual website, because there are 30,000 positive comments. They've sent me the spreadsheet. You know, this is a great service. It's saved me so much time, being that I live in Pennsylvania, so they accessed it over the web. You can go into the courts and they have kiosks there where you can do it. The DIY program is the best thing the court system ever did. It makes the process easier and faster. I mean, the people in the New York courts were gobsmacked that they enjoy their jobs now. Instead of people coming to them and saying, I don't understand this, or I'm having trouble, they can direct them to this, where many people are able to solve their own problems. Jumping back to my PowerPoint. So what does all this have to do with experiential learning? I'm glad you asked. So once we had this thing up and running and got it going, we started to experiment with the idea that maybe we can teach students how to use this software, and we could pair them up with legal aid organizations as mentors. And they will produce, because it's expensive to pay or to get legal aid attorneys, you know, off the front lines and into, you know, automating forms. I mentioned before that there were 1,000 forms already automated. To me, that's a good start. You know, there should be 10,000. There should be as many as it makes sense to automate, so that the default is for people to have a positive experience in solving their problem for themselves. So the students in Ron Stout's class, he called it the Justice Technology Practicum, were required to, they go over to the Daly Center, which is the largest court in Chicago, and they help out at the help desk. And if people have a problem that they can solve themselves, there's a kiosk computer there. Then they are paired up with a legal aid attorney. They do a scope document, which is legal research. They research the legal space. So if it's expungement in Nebraska or small claims in Oklahoma, they have to do a research memo on that. They storyboard it, you know, themselves, and I mean not in some fancy software, but storyboard it on a whiteboard or with Post-it notes or with Microsoft Word. They write the questions, and then we train them into how to use A2JAUTHOR, and then they coded the guided interview themselves in A2JAUTHOR, and then handed it over when the semester was over to the legal aid organization, who would then you know, do one more evaluation and then post it for the public to use on the national server. So the students worked on all kinds of, and this is important, all kinds of areas of law: healthcare, power of attorneys, uncontested divorces, voluntary acknowledgement of paternity, expungement orders. One of the students even had a project with the Nez Perce Indian tribe in Washington State. I thought that was a really cool project. So the next step, so what we learned from that is that this type of project forces the students to do a deep dive, not just into the law because of the research they have to do, but also into the heuristics, right? How is the law actually applied in the real world? Because it's not, the statute isn't always the same thing as the best practice or the guidance that you could provide someone in doing something. I am not a lawyer. I can't speak more to say than just what I've just described. It exposed them to policy issues, to ethical issues. You know, they have to walk the line between giving guidance and giving legal advice inside of a piece of software, and so they had to understand where that line was and not cross it. We believe this is the future of lawyering, and so this was practice in how lawyering is going to be practiced more often in the future. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in my next step. And a lot of times the students didn't work alone. They worked in teams of 2 or 3, so they had to work, you know, they had to break up the process. They had to understand what each other was doing. There was project management going on. And the empathy comment there is that to really help someone through the medium of the computer, you have to really understand that they are, English is a second language, may not have finished high school, so you can't use your legalese. You gotta write at a 6th or 7th grade level, and these people are stressed out. So, so help them with this project. After that, we did 2 rounds of what we call the A2JAUTHOR course project, where we invited 5 or 6 or 7 folks from other schools. This is one of the teams. Here are the team members from all sorts of schools, and they worked on, in this sense, we didn't want a variety. I mean, we did not want, but we weren't looking for the variety of legal situations. We wanted a variety of courses that A2JAUTHOR could be dropped into. So I don't have the names of all the courses here, but they were dropped into clinic courses, elder law clinics, also into third-year seminars. Judy Wagner's Becoming a Professional course. Rebecca Trammell taught a legal research, advanced legal research course. Blitt and Wojcik were taught a course that was just called A2JAUTHOR seminar. And from this, we learned an enormous amount of how to use what's essentially a commercial or a legal automation tool in a legal education situation. Of course, we got positive feedback from students. I say of course because nobody does presentations where the student reaction slide is like, "Oh my God, this was terrible. Go away," But to be honest, they were very positive. I had never done this sort of programming before. Oh, I like some of these. Before I took this, I did not fully grasp the importance of technology. So it does expose students to things that they wouldn't see in other courses. Challenge my own beliefs about the role of a lawyer and the reality that lawyers are not always necessary for simple processes. So that's almost like the core of what we're doing with A2JAUTHOR. Maybe we can address this access to justice gap with some automation, and lawyers then will spend more of their time practicing at the top of their license, doing actual lawyering, actual client interaction, but all the boring form filling out stuff, can be done by the client or by the SRL themselves interacting with the computer. So here are some lessons we learned from that. Teaching students software requires support, both more and less than we thought. So less because students are more tech savvy, that is true. They're more willing to jump in and try stuff. And more because they're busy and in a hurry and need their hands held. But we found that even when we had 20, 30, 40 students in a semester from 4 or 5 different schools, we were not overwhelmed because we provided all the technical support, answering emails, jumping onto something like this, little go to webinar meetings, showing the software, doing training sessions. Students have Macs, right? Actually, more than 50% of law students have Macintoshes. We know this from statistics on the Cali website. And this is a problem because most of the software that's written for lawyers is Windows-based. As a matter of fact, the original version of A2JAUTHOR was Windows only. And so for the Mac students, they had to install something called Parallels or install it in a separate partition. It was doable, but it was a headache. HotDocs, which is the document assembly part, was only Windows software, and it was a huge problem. We did something to address that later. I'll briefly mention that later. Coordinating with the subject matter experts, the legal aid attorneys, is very hard, right? This isn't their day job to help students, and so finding effective mentors is a difficult thing. The ideal thing we learned from this is that it should be 2 projects, maybe even 2 semesters. One where they do a small little run through the whole thing, soup to nuts, to get a sense of the entire scope of it, and then a second one where they actually do a real project with a subject matter expert on a real court form or something like that. I'll talk about that as well a little bit more. Training faculty is hard. if they aren't invested. This shouldn't be a surprise to you if you're law faculty. You don't know about this stuff. And since you're not taking the class, you're in a situation where you're going to end up knowing less than the students do. And so when the students come to you and say, you know, I'm having trouble figuring this out, you're like, well, I don't know. I've not automated a form or used the software. So we tried to do some basic training of the faculty. Perhaps stupidly, we did it right up front so they knew what they were getting into. But then months later, when they actually taught the course, or even a couple of months later when they were into the guided interview part with their students, they couldn't remember because that was 2 months ago and it was only a couple of hours. And so we have to figure out how to keep the faculty invested in this. But it's also a, what do you call it? It's a generational problem, right? You are law faculty who maybe haven't practiced, and you certainly haven't practiced using these new tools, and the students now are becoming exposed to these through this program and others. And you don't have the type of experience that might require to share with them. So part of our solution that we're thinking is that we're going to create some closed universe 2 to 4 hour projects that you can drop into a course. There would be a completed A to J guided interview for comparison, like a model answer. You know, we'll do 5 or 10 of these in different subject areas, you know, criminal expungements, uncontested divorce, so family law, maybe intellectual property, maybe elder law, you know, who knows? With the goal that you would be able, that this becomes interesting to faculty who teach just about any third-year course, not just access to justice or modest means courses or clinic courses for that matter. This would give the students all the exposure to the problem space, the ethical issues, you know, and then it becomes something that the faculty themselves could decide to pick, well, which area do I want to go deeper or broader in? They could talk more about the ethics of advice or guidance through computers. They could talk about going deeper into the law, because the law is just a big spreadsheet, not a spreadsheet, a big decision tree, but you have to trim the tree at some point. You can't handle every possibility in one of these guided interviews. The faculty could talk about unbundling. So maybe you don't automate the whole process, but you automate a small piece of it, at which point the person has to go find an attorney to take it to the next step. If it's a law practice tech course or a law practice course, you know, maybe that's the emphasis for something like this. So what about practice-ready graduates? Is this going to be a solution to practice-ready graduates? Well, not the whole solution, of course not, but hopefully some part of the solution. But I want to emphasize that all this use of computers it's not about computers replacing lawyers or taking jobs away from lawyers. I see it as it's making lawyers better, faster, smarter. We have the technology. And in order to do that, the students who become lawyers have to become familiar with the capabilities of this technology. And I mean that in a way that says that familiar without being sold a bill of goods by somebody trying to make money. I'm not dissing the vendors who sell practice management systems or things like that, but you have to be a smart consumer of those things. And A2JAUTHOR is a free tool in which some of those ideas can be explored. And that's one of our goals for the development of this, not only for legal aid to benefit, but for legal education to benefit as well. So there's plenty of articles out there. I hope I don't have to explain what unbundling is. It's taking apart long, complicated processes and putting them into small pieces. And in the case of legal representation, you would only be the lawyer for small pieces. Limited scope representation is another term for this. There's a growing movement for bar associations to have mandatory tech CLE, and hopefully that doesn't mean learn how to do endnotes in Word or how to fix outlines, but rather how to do document assembly, how to do automated legal practice, how to do representation when you never see the client. You only talk to them through email, text messages. God, I hope not. I hope you're not sending legal documents that way, but you know what I mean, or through Skype or GoToMeeting or something like that. So A2JAUTHOR is designed or created for automating court forms, but it's also a general purpose decision tree tool. And that means there's a whole bunch of other possibilities that we are just beginning to explore, and that I think are green fields for law schools to explore if they want to with their students. Benefits calculators, doing eligibility checks, pre-court checklists. What do I have to bring before I'm there? What should I say in certain situations? Compliance checks. Online intake, it's already being used for quite a bit. Standalone information guides, and legal health checkups. We have a project with the ABA right now to develop some legal health checkups, and of course triage. Who should use which tool? A2JAUTHOR could also be used as a rapid response tool. So the programmer's not there. It just requires the subject matter expert, the smart person, to be there. Why does that keep doing that? It keeps backing up on me. Let's back up. Sorry about that. So in the situation where in the recent the immigration actions in airports, I could imagine that some smart immigration lawyer says, well, we need to be able to automate these processes or this checklist or something like that. And if they were schooled in the use of A2JAUTHOR, they could show up, create the forms, and then quote unquote publish them, make them available for attorneys or for people who needed immigration help and were representing themselves. I've attended several. I've been to a couple of hackathons. The interesting thing about hackathons is it's really hard to get programmers to show up, and an awful lot of time is spent with programmers trying to understand the legal people and the legal people trying to understand the programmers. And so with A2JAUTHOR, you may not need the programmer. You could just have the legal people creating the decision tree, creating the guided interview, and focus instead on what should be asked, in what order it should be asked, and you'll have more time to generate something that could then theoretically immediately be published for others to use. I could also see A2JAUTHOR being used for a long-term, clinics built around students who are interested in an area of law that want to help automate areas of law, not just access to justice areas. So to wrap up, there's legal education, there's technology, there's access to justice, and there's law practice, and there's an intersection of that Venn diagram right there in the middle. Law practice is becoming increasingly automated, systematized, digital, and mobile. Not all of this is good. A lot of it's going to be bad because it also means dehumanized. It also means people will say, well, you can go look it up on Google or on the internet. Why do we need to pay lawyers to do this? That's a bad thing. But in order for people or legal education to get a handle on this, I believe they have to have a tool available to them so that they can understand what it is that's being done in the justice system, and maybe find ways to do it right. I would hope that that's the case. So so that's where Callie and A2JAUTHOR is working, at that happy nexus point between these four areas, and I hope that we can reach that goal. So if you're interested, go to A2JAUTHOR.org, sign up for an account, and look around. It's very much still under construction, pardon our dust. So if it's ugly or you can't find things, it'll get better over time. Our roadmap is that we want to host guided interviews for clinics and law schools for SRLs to use. We're working on building package stimulations like the ones I talked about. It's already mobile friendly. It's built in. Let me see if I can quickly demo that. So if I go to, I need to find that guy. So if I go to this guided interview and I knock it out of, there we are. So the way I demo mobile is I take the guided interview in the browser and I just shrink it down to the size of a cell phone, and you can see that it converted itself into the mobile interface. So the little people disappear, but you can still answer questions and work your way around through the system. Oops. All right. We are working, we have a working document assembly tool that's built into A2JAUTHOR. The reason for that is so that people don't have to buy or borrow Hot Docs, which is a Windows-only tool. The entire A2JAUTHOR, the new version, is a web-based tool, so it'll work in any browser on any operating system. Should make the Mac using students happy. We will provide free training for your classes and support for your students, and we have a website where we're starting to dump everything that we learned about this at a2jclinic.classcaster.net for sample syllabi from our A2J course project and from Ron's practicum course. All the links are in this PowerPoint, which I will upload to SlideShare and other places. I'm also recording, so I'll upload that recording, and I'll post all this. I'll give it to Jenny as well as have a Spotlight article. That's spotlight.cali.org, where you can learn more. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. It's 3:38, so I spoke a little bit over half hour. I'm now happy to take any questions you might have. I'm going to drag this open. If you want to raise your hand, I can unmute you. Or Jenny, do you think I should try unmuting everybody and see what happens?
I say let's go for it if it's a small group.
All right. Mute all the participants. Unmute all the participants. Oh, there we are. I'm working my way through unmuting you all. If anybody has any questions, now's the time to ask them. Jeff Ward, I see you have a question.
I was just curious if you've been deliberate about, you said you used human-centered principles or design principles in designing A2J. First of all, thank you very much, John. I thought that was really helpful, and I've known about the tool, but I love seeing it described in that way, and it was really helpful to me. So
Thanks.
I'm wondering if, as part of Ron's class or as part of other curricular offerings, you've seen people bring in very accessible human-centered design tools or materials in order to train the students, not only in the tech, but also the design principles that underlie them.
So usually when Jessica does her training, or Jessica Frank is my works for Cali, or when I give talks, and I'm often asked to give talks to classes, I'll bring up those design things. But I got to admit, it gets short shrift, partly because there's just so much to cover to get people up to speed that we often don't have time to go into those. But I'm more than happy to talk about that in greater detail, because I think design and law, I mean, the amazing work that Margaret Hagan's doing at Stanford, the great work being done at Northeastern, you know, the more of it, the better.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Anybody else have any here? Sorry, some of you are not unmuted, but now I'm trying to unmute you. You muted yourself. Very good. Anybody else have any questions, comments? Happy to.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, I think you answered this, but just to be sure, the A2J platform works on cell phones also?
Yes, it does. It's that is to say, you can't author on the cell phone,
Right.
but you can run the guided interviews. Now it's not an app.
Mm-hmm.
It's a website.
Right.
And we've looked into app integration, but app stores are a real big pain, and they cost money for each one. And so we've mostly shied away from trying to create an app ecosystem, and rather try to create a platform that would host these things for law students and lawyers to use. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Kim McLaurin at Suffolk University Law School.
Hi, Kim. Thanks for the question.
Not a problem.
Anybody else?
Yes, this is Jenny Brook. I'm curious, when you've collaborated with law schools and folks doing experiential learning, have you had an experience where it's been one project as part of a clinic that's doing other things, or is it more of a best practice to have the whole clinic invested in an A2J project?
So both. And the reason we couldn't tell people what the best practice was because we didn't know what it was. And every school or every situation is going to be like, well, this is a 6-credit course, so it was, in some cases, the A2J project was dropped in as 2 hours of the 6-credit course. In other cases, it was a 2-hour seminar, so it was, 3/4 of the course. In some cases, the whole class worked on one project, and in some cases, every student had their own project. And those, and some of the, like I said, some of the things we learned were that we need to reduce the mechanical problems as much as possible, and maybe even run the students through one like a sample obstacle course before they run the real obstacle course, dealing directly with legal aid people or with mentors. But what we did find is it kind of works everywhere. I mean, it can be made to work everywhere because the idea of automating the law with decision trees is 20, 30 years old, and the law is kind of a big flow chart sometimes. But also capturing the heuristic, there a lot of times not all the questions in a guided interview are legal questions. A lot of them are questions about the person's ability to follow through on a complicated legal process themselves. Because if they can't figure out, if they can't make their way to court and state their issues or something like that, then maybe the best advice, and I use the word advice guardedly, is for them to somehow, some way find their way to an attorney, because they're just not gonna have a successful outcome otherwise.
I have one more question if no one else does.
David, Boatsner has his hand up. David, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Close enough. John, I've actually, this may be a question you'll need a guided interview to answer, I'm not sure. But I worked with, several years ago, taught a course where we developed tools through Logic, a proprietary software, but it seems very similar in a lot of what it will do. And I'm very interested in A2JAUTHOR and A2J program because it's free to us to use. My question is, if we developed a tool through a clinic, class, or seminar that was then useful for, I work with veterans, the Veterans Clinic, it would be useful to put out there for other people counseling veterans out in the field to use, would they be able to use A2J for free?
So
how free is it? I guess is my question.
Yes, the answer is yes. That's why we did it. We're in cooperative competition with products like Neota. I know Michael Mills. Neota is a great product. We've done some design things and some approach things that are different from them. But if you've worked with Neota, then you already understand almost everything I said, because the same sort of things apply. Neota is a decision tree expert system builder. There are others like this, like A2JAUTHOR, that may or may not have the same attention to design or to the interface. Hot Docs, oh my gosh, direct forms, there's actually millions of form filler outer packages if you go to Tech Show next week. And there's nothing wrong with using those with this, other than we're trying to get something that is owned and loved by the legal education space, so that we can do our research and our exploration of this capability as it grows. We've got all kinds of ideas about how we can put a voice interface on this, put a text interface on this, so you're answering the questions one text message at a time, and because we control the software, we can explore those things.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Jenny, did you say you had a question?
Yes, I see that the feedback from students has been really positive, and the feedback from some of the consumers of the guided interviews, at least from the New York site, were really positive. Have you received any feedback from some of the legal service providers, the legal aid organizations, and the lawyers working there about how this has improved or freed up their work? Or
Wow, great question, and a reality check. So there's definitely, when we started, there was a lot of resistance to the idea that we're giving up on these people who we can't get to, and we're tossing them off to this, not sketchy website where they may or may not be able to solve their own problem. We won over converts over time because we added features and capabilities in response to that, the learn mores, the pop-ups, and other things. But we continue to have, let's just say, interesting conversations with bar associations and access to justice commissions around the country. Some of you may know about what's going on in North Carolina, right? So North Carolina has passed a bar rule or a law, I'm not sure which, that basically says if you're going to put an automated form up, there has to be a lawyer whose essentially insurance covers the malpractice should somebody decide to sue or something like that. I mean, something like that, if it spreads, will destroy this market or destroy the idea of software providing guidance to somebody. Fortunately, we're not party to any of those lawsuits or any of those problems because there's this 600-pound gorilla in the space called LegalZoom that is attracting all the lawsuits and fighting them because they're at the other end of the market, right? They're doing LLCs, they're doing trademarks, they're doing automated forms for which they can make a profit or for which they can obtain a referral to their lawyer network for. And so sometimes we make a joke and call ourselves Legal Aid Zoom. Because we're down at the bottom of the market or the free end of the market where nobody's going to want to automate these forms for profit because these people are poor in the first place. And another aspect of this is sometimes when the bar and the courts get together on these Access to Justice Commission, the bar says, well, if you automate simplified divorce, you're going to take away our bread and butter. And the courts say, well, I got 80% of the people that come in here are unrepresented. Are you going to provide, pro bono or low bono representation for all these people? And the bar says, well, no, of course not. And the judge says, then shut up, So it becomes, these people it becomes a reality check for everybody to figure out what the best way to do this is. The last part of that question is legal aid attorneys are just like everybody else, which is to say they're too busy being attorneys to go meta on themselves and figure out how to be more efficient attorneys. And so we haven't gotten a lot of uptake of attorneys using this in their own practice. The place where we're getting interest in that is in the incubators. So this week is the incubator conference at Texas A&M, and I'll be talking about this. But the incubator folks are very interested in training their students, their graduates, their recent graduates, in how to use these so that their solo and small practice is made more efficient by the use of tools like this. Kim McLaurin has a hand up.
Hi. If a prospective client uses A2J, the information that they complete, is that captured if that person becomes an actual client? And how do you store that data?
So right now we don't do any of that because we're the tool maker. But in the real world, so on LHI, where most of our guided interviews are, LHI is Law Help Interactive. There are wonderful partners. LHI is run by ProBonoNet, probono.net. And if the user chooses to save their data because they want to come back later, that's optional, by the way. They can work through a guided interview, get a document at the end, and then go away. Or they can put their name and a password in, and then it will save it so they can come back a week later and make changes because they misunderstood something. So the data is stored on the LHI server, encrypted, of course, and hopefully not subpoenaable, but that hasn't been tested too heavily. I imagine that when we start hosting, we're gonna take a policy of it will be encrypted in a way that even we can't see it. You know what I mean? I don't want to say I refuse to answer a subpoena. I want to say I've designed the system in a way that makes it incapable of responding.
Right.
You know, that only the user can see their own stuff. That's the ideal design, I think, for this type of situation. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
And by the way, this is not at all settled at all in terms of certainly not settled in terms of law, but not settled in terms of practice. It's you know, as you might imagine with Homeland Security and other things, this is a very tricky space to be in, and I don't know what the answers are, but I think that I can, every time there's a problem like that, I try to turn it into an educational opportunity.
Right.
Very good. Any other questions, comments, discussion? Happy to take them offline if you want. If you want to send me an email after this and or follow up. Like I said, you know, A2JAUTHOR.org. You can go sign up there. It's a two-step process. You sign up. Jessica gets an email in which first you get an email confirming your email address. Then she makes sure you're not a two-headed monster, that you're from an actual law school, and then you can go and play around with the tool. There's a ton of training materials. Let me go backwards. Yeah, there's a ton of training materials on our YouTube channel. In other words, every time we do a training, we stick them up on our YouTube channel. I'm going to put this presentation up on our YouTube channel, so you can watch Jessica, you know, teach either, you know, hour-long things or, you know, little 10-minute. Here's how you do one particular thing with A2J.
Well, if that's it for questions, I just want to thank John for the excellent presentation. So much to think about. I'm sure you'll be hearing from many of us, and really appreciate you taking the time to do this today.
You're welcome. It was a delight.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. It was great. All right. Take care, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.